Tens of millions of cruise passengers sail every year, but there are some misconceptions that just so many people still get wrong. Some of them are rumors spread online, some are opinions people have without ever actually sailing, and some are myths spread by the cruise lines themselves. But I'm pulling back the curtain, letting you know what things just aren't true on a cruise, no matter what others may tell you. Before I get started, I had to say a huge thank you to a certain someone, or should I actually say 100,000 someones. Because of people just like you, Cruzely has broken the 100K mark, so thank you so much. The first thing that any passenger will learn on a cruise is that those advertisements they see in some way stretch the truth. For example, I always notice they show people having a good time on a cruise, which is accurate, but the catch is that there's barely anyone else around. Anyone that's taken a cruise knows that that's not true. Yes, there are quiet times and quiet places on the ship. I love taking a walk first thing in the morning when it can feel like you have the ship to yourself. But anytime after about 9 a.m. and you're going to be sharing that ship with a few thousand of your closest friends. Go to events like the sailaway party or just hang out by the pool on a sea day and it can be nearly shoulder to shoulder. Bottom line, when you see these sorts of advertisements, know that it is possible, but certainly not likely to have a spot all to yourself. Another thing that isn't true, or at least all the time, is that the exclusive sale that you see from the cruise line is most likely not that special, and that threat that the sale is going to go away is often empty and not something that you really need to worry about. First things first, cruise lines, they run sales all the time, and generally the prices end up being the same price even if the sale is tweaked. So maybe one week it's 30% off all passengers, and then the next sale it's 60% off a second passenger. Those come out to the same price. Especially right now, cruise lines are having no problems filling ships, so it makes zero sense for them to offer large across-the-board discounts. If they are needing to get passengers booked for a cruise, then a discount or offer for those specific trips is more likely. What you'll also see are a lot of warnings and even countdown timers about a sale ending. Then, like magic, it seems to get extended, so the last chance turns into another week or two of that sale. Food is always a big deal on a cruise, and why not? You've got thousands of people on vacation and they want to eat up. Cruise lines, they put in tons of restaurants on the ship to meet those appetites. If you see the advertisement, it all looks like gourmet and the best thing that you ever eaten. The reality is a bit different. Yes, there is a lot of good food on cruise ships and there is plenty of gourmet dining, but there's also a lot of stuff that is there to feed the masses quickly, especially in the buffet. It can really be hit or miss. I've found that you have to be a little choosy on what and where you eat. If you visit a specialty restaurant, it's usually all high quality, but spots designed to feed lots of people like the main dining room or the buffet, they can be anywhere from great to terrible. You definitely won't go hungry, but the idea that everything served is amazing just isn't the truth. This is one that took me a while to realize, but now that I have, I cannot stop noticing it. So I'm sorry in advance if this ruins cruise ads for you, but I have to point it out. Go to any cruise line website or look at any cruise brochure. I already mentioned that you won't see other people, but another thing that you will never see is a person wearing what most of us wear on a cruise, a t-shirt. Seriously, if they're in the water, then they are shirtless or in a bikini as you would expect. If they aren't in the water, then it's always something with a collar. Of course, the reality is that cruises are much more casual, and t-shirts, unless dressing up for the dining room, they are the rule on board, not the exception. Now, I grew up in a house that didn't cruise. When it was ever brought up as a possibility or even mentioned, my dad always loved to point out how he didn't want to have to be on someone else's schedule on vacation. So I always thought cruising was heavily regimented. Now, it is true that there is a schedule of when everything happens on board. The show starts at 7 p.m., trivia is at 3 p.m., and all aboard is at 5 p.m., things like that. But apart from the all aboard time, there may be a schedule, but you don't have to follow anything if you don't want to. So if the 7 p.m. show in the theater is inconvenient for you, there's usually another one at 9:30, or you can just skip it altogether. But you can get up when you want, you can eat when you want, and do what you want whenever. Just because there's a daily schedule doesn't mean that you have to follow it. This is one that I had completely wrong before I ever took my first cruise. Now, that first trip, I took it when I got a gift certificate for Royal Caribbean as a wedding present. Before then, cruising was never on my radar. When my wife and I got the gift, we were polite and we were very thankful, but honestly, once we were alone, we just kind of laughed. Cruising? Isn't that for old people? We couldn't have been more wrong. In fact, cruising might be one of the most diverse experiences that you can have. If you're sailing a mass market line, you will find seemingly every single race, color, age, sexual preference, religion, everything. There's young, old, gay, straight, black, white, purple, green. Everybody is represented. Now, there will be trends that some cruise lines cater to different crowds, but if you're thinking it is all older folks, then you are in for a big surprise. At least in the Caribbean, you might be under the impression that when you get to port, you're going to be visiting some exotic port of call. It's going to look and smell and sound different than anything else back home. All those quotes about travel expanding your horizons or making you more open-minded may be in your thoughts. What's true is something pretty different. In reality, you can find some exotic things about ports of call, but they won't be in the port area directly off the ship. The truth is that at least right in the port area, most of the time it's a tourist trap, sometimes literally. They can be tough to exit to get to the real city. Meanwhile, the buildings there aren't genuine, but sort of a Disney-fied version of the place. There are lots of bars and restaurants and souvenir shops selling everything you can imagine, and it's all designed to cater to American tourists, and because of the ships, it's filled with Americans, not locals. So neat to visit? Sure, but the idea or marketing that you're going to visit some exotic or remote place just isn't the case usually. If you hop on social media, you might find videos of people behaving badly on the cruise ship. I've personally seen videos of people fighting or fishing up the side of the ship, even peeing in hallways after late nights. I won't argue that these things do not happen. There is literal video evidence. I've been on nearly 30 cruises, and the worst that I've seen is some PDA with clothes still on an adults only cruise line. In general, people are there just to have a good time and enjoy themselves, not to do anything that will get them kicked off the ship or arrested. So yes, it does happen, but remember that the internet is not always real life. And if you're worried about it, different cruise lines have different crowds, and even different cruises have different atmospheres. Typically, shorter cruises tend to be a bit more of a party atmosphere. Maybe you took a cruise, you didn't like it, and you thought cruising isn't for you. Or you heard someone else's horror story about sailing one line and swore off sailing entirely. There's a misconception out there that views cruising as some monolithic thing. Anyone that's cruised multiple lines knows that that is absolutely not the case. Yes, there are definite similarities from line to line. I like to say that about 80% of cruising is the same. You've got hanging out poolside and evening entertainment, hopping from port to port, and fancy dining in the evening. But there's 20% that can vary widely and make the whole experience different for you. No one would confuse the atmosphere of a Carnival cruise for a celebrity cruise. And the style is much different on an Alaskan cruise than a European cruise than a Caribbean cruise. Just because you have taken one cruise does not mean that you've taken every cruise. After more than a decade of writing and talking about cruising, one thing I've heard countless times is that cruise lines are floating Petri dishes. Now, I don't know where this started, but I will admit I see how people can get that impression. Whenever there's a health issue on a cruise, it makes headlines. Things like stomach bug outbreaks are tracked and reported by the CDC. COVID cases during the pandemic were widely reported. There's no arguing that yes, an illness it can spread on a ship. With so many people in close proximity, it does happen. I'd argue the same could be said for any gathering of people, as we saw during the pandemic. But the idea that cruise ships overall are dirty, that is just not true. It is much more common for a ship to score a 100 on its health inspection than to fail it, which means scoring below an 86. Most ships score in the mid-90s or above. I don't know that I've ever been to a place where I've seen as much cleaning in general as a cruise ship. 30 spots here and there, absolutely, but overall, I've always been impressed with how much the crew is constantly cleaning and how well the ships are kept up. I do think there are some things that may have been true in the past on cruises, but aren't the case anymore. One great example of this is the idea of hokey entertainment on board. It might be that if you sailed 20 years ago or on an old ship today, then yes, there can be some evening entertainment. That's a bit old-fashioned. But if you think that cruise ships are only drawing D-level talent that couldn't hack it anywhere else, then that is just not the case. In fact, entertainment on cruise ships can be literally from Broadway, and the shows can be Vegas caliber in some cases. It tends to be that the newer and larger the ship is, the more outstanding the theater performances will be. There's stuff that you'll see on cruises that you will not see anywhere else. Bottom line, if you expect the onboard shows to be cheesy, then think again. Thank you so much for watching, and I want to know something that maybe you've heard that isn't true on a cruise ship. Put it in the comments below. As well, if you have an upcoming cruise, be sure to visit Cruzely.com for tips on everything from packing to parking. If you like this video, then I hope you'll subscribe as we shoot for now 200,000 subscribers. Thank you so much, and until next time, happy sailing.